Hello, welcome back to Sterling Armory's YouTube channel, and we're doing a swords review today. And I need to apologize up front. My laptop is going kind of crazy, so it sounds like something's stuck in the fan. So if you hear this loud, like the speaker, I'm trying to move it away from the laptop, but if you there just went. So if you hear this noise like that's my laptop freaking out. Hopefully it doesn't cut off in the middle of the stream. But today we have a sword review of some new stuff we wanted to get out, and we're going to have available just a few pieces at the Salt Lake Open HEMA tournament this weekend. So if you're out at Salt Lake Open and you want to try out any of these blades, please come and let us know, and hopefully one of these blades will be a prize for one of the categories or one of the brackets of the tournament. So real quick, what do we have? So Sparring Blades. A lot of you guys who follow us may be familiar with some of these already. So we did a video and we had a review with Black Flag HEMA, our local HEMA group, on our Sparring Blades longsword that we did, I think back in just before Combat Con this year. And we had this longsword and another longsword I'm about to show out at Combat Con. But they were pretty new as I hit things. And I wanted to talk about them a bit more and the design that I'm going with and why we're doing what we're doing. So real quick, if I can put it this way. So I grew up in the martial arts, and whether it's the Chinese martial arts that I mostly did or some of the Japanese arts and not just sword arts, but also doing knife work or any other weapon work. Our goal and what I really learned is I personally like training with a tool that represents the real item as close as possible. And my laptop's freaking out again. Hopefully you can't pick that up. So our goal in designing these is a couple of things. One, we get a lot of customers asking for sparring blades that are not fetters. And okay, we wanted to do that. And we've made a lot of those before, but a lot of them are for more stage-oriented purposes, so they may not work as sparring blades. So I wanted to now fix that gap to be now not just a sparring blade that is not a fetter, but also a sparring blade that accurately represents your cutting sword. And that's the goal of these blades. So real quick, what we did is, and this is, I'm honestly doing this for me as well, because I like, in my training and my sparring, I like using, again, an implement that more closely represents my cutting sword or my actual blade. So what we did here is basically the design is from about the halfway point down, if you can see, that is a type 15 or a type 18 blade. And then from the halfway point out to the end, to the tip, to the flared tip, is a fetter. So we have sword, fetter. So and that's pretty much constant through all three of these. And what this does is we have a drastic distal taper. And this particular one is 8 millimeters down to about 3 millimeters. Or for our US guys, it's 0.32 at the base, 0.32 inches at the base, down to about 0.15, 0.1215, depending on the blade, at the midpoint. So a drastic distal taper in the sword part of the blade at the first half. And that makes a very stiff blade. So when you're in the bind, you can kind of dominate the bind on most blades because they're not going to be as stiff there. And then from the midpoint out, now we have a flexible fetter end. So if you look at the whole blade, from the midpoint out to the tip is where it flexes. So what this does is, and something I think we have a little bit of difference on is because I'm used to making a lot of historical blades and making blades that would fit in with historical examples, I really focus on blade dynamics and blade harmonics. And I'm not trying to put down any fetter makers because I love all the equipment available. And I certainly can't beat the price on a lot of fetters out there. But a lot of fetters I use, I don't think the makers have weapon dynamics in mind when they're making their blades, because they want to make a good sparring blade or a good fetter per those designs. So just due to the nature of a fetter, it's never going to match the dynamics of your cutting sword. And that's our goal, right? So what this design allows is it gets, I'm trying to do anything. It gets the blade dynamics. So your hilt node is in the right spot. If you look at my fingers, no movement there. So the hilt node's in the right spot. And then the blade node, I can't get it all on camera. The blade node is in the right spot. So we got the nodes in the right spot. We got the pivot points in the right spot. So the blade, the long swords pivot about near the tip, and then our arming swords pivot a little bit up. And then the other thing we tried to do is move that balance point back. So the sword does feel, it still feels roughly the same as your cutting sword, but because we have that drastic distal taper there, it moves the balance point back without messing with our dynamics. So the blade isn't hitting hard, because we don't want, that's the thing with a sparring blade, is you don't want it hitting hard, because that's not fun. So with all the feedback so far, it's been good, and the design seems to be working. So we're just curious on everyone else's thoughts in the HEMA community, and if you like these, and if you want us making more. So real quick, some of the other design features of each of these before we go into the differences is we have that flared tip. So what we did is we took, basically I took a roll tip, the average roll tip that a lot of makers use and that a lot of tournaments allowed, and I took the surface area of that roll tip that hits, and then I basically equated that surface area to what I can get on my blades here. So this flares up again to about, it's a little over 8 millimeters, or about 0.33, I think it is here. And then basically we made it, that's why this flares a little bit. So that way that whole area is about equal to what the roll tip is. So you have a nice area. It's never going to go through fabric. And it's a nice soft surface. You shouldn't have to wrap it or anything like that because it's so large. So to take the weight out of that, we pretty much flared it we kept it thin as far as we could and then flared it up just a little bit. So it doesn't add much tip mass. We also didn't flare it so wide that it acts like a hammer. So it seems to be a pretty good tip. And then it's a lot stronger than a roll tip because it won't break off. Some of the other features on the handles. So guards and pommels are stainless. The edge thickness on most of these is around 1/8 inch, so about 0.2 or 0.125-ish. So actually anywhere between 0.1 and 0.13, I think, on most of these. And so in millimeters, what is that? 3 millimeter? Yeah, so 3-ish millimeter edges. And then on our guards and pommels, everything's extra, especially the guard. The top of the guard is an important part. You can actually see some dings here from when I've been sparring with this one already. I think you can see that. This is my personal one. So we did extra rounding on the tops of the guards. So that way when you're getting impacts from other blades, it's not going to dig into any sharp corners, but it's nice and rounded. So we did that a bit extra. I don't know if can you see any dings there? But yeah, it's been sparred with a bunch and holding up pretty good. So this particular one has a blue grip with a half wire, which we can do on any blade. Can you hear that? That's my laptop freaking out. So hopefully you can hear that. So our next one is our longsword. Other longsword, I should say. So this is the other one that was at Combat Con, but I've actually modified this to get more what I wanted, because I kind of rushed this one before Combat Con, but now it's where I want it. So this particular blade, my sparring sword, I didn't say the stats. So this is a 38-inch long blade, and it's about 3 pounds, 3 pounds, 8 ounces, so 3.5 pounds. So it's a little beefy for a sparring blade, but again, it's a good equivalent to my personal cutting sword. So the other one basically is a lighter version of the same blade. So it's the same diamond profile, same tip, different pommel. So the pommel's a bit lighter, guard's a bit lighter. And then what we did, the modification I did is, I think you can somewhat see it. There we go. Maybe. Is, again, from the first half of the blade, it's a type 18 or a type 15 sword. On the second half of the blade, instead of being a flat fetter, it's actually a hollow ground fetter. So that ended up taking a bunch of weight out. And again, all the flexibility is in the end. Same tip. Again, a 38-inch blade. And I think the weight on this is 3 pounds 3 ounces or 3 pounds 4 ounces. So a bit lighter than the other one. And now that I did the hollow ground, it actually feels It feels a lot lighter than 3 pounds, 3 ounces. The downside is a little bit more wobblier than the other one, but again, you gain the extra lighter blade. So that's that one. Ooh. And then our new one that I just finished for Salt Lake Open is our arming sword. So arming sword is essentially the same idea. So with the arming sword, though, we wanted one of the big design characteristics is we had to make sure the grip would work with your sparring gloves, right? So for the long sword, you have two on, but arming swords sometimes the grips are a little too short. So we lengthen the grip a bit so it fits nicely with your glove. And this is a Sparring Gloves XL. Yeah, this is an XL, and again fits great with the sparring glove. So we lengthen. We lengthen the grip. I'm trying to remember if I lengthened it by 3/4 of an inch is what I lengthened it by. So if you look at so that's about 3/4 of an inch lengthened from the normal grip. And again, starts 8 millimeters at the base, down to about 3 millimeters where it's a sword, where it's super stiff. Again, 3 millimeter edges, and then it's flat 3 millimeters all the way out to the tip, and then the tip flares back up and is nice and rounded off, just like the longsword is. Now, this particular one at the moment, it's 2 pounds, 2 pounds, 8 ounces, so 2.5 pounds. And again, you have your nodes in the right spot. Notice when I hit my blade, my fingers aren't vibrating. The blade node, if I can get it right, blade node's in the right spot. It's a 32-inch long blade, and it feels like your average longsword. So again, the purpose of these is to really mimic a Type 15 or a Type 18 longsword. So again, there's a huge variation in Type 18s and 15s, but for your most part, what's available today and what most people are cutting with today, this is kind of a good sparring version of those blades. So, trying to think if I'm missing anything here. So, these will be available at Salt Lake Open, and again, hopefully one of these will be a prize. And then if you're at one of these tournaments, or if you're a local HEMA guy, or if you're a reviewer, that wants to try one of these, please let me know, and I will try to get one of these out to you. Now, keep in mind, we are one-of-a-kind makers, so every piece that we make here is one of a kind. But we do have this sparring blade pattern for arming swords and long swords. And again, we can change the length on it, no problem. And but the overall design, we want to see if the HEMA community likes it. Again, my goal is as a user as well, is I wanted to make something that I enjoy using and that I would want to use in a tournament, or I want to use for sparring. And these are the results. So if you have any questions, please let us know. One thing about the arming sword, so this is still a little too stiff for me, so I might take a little bit more weight out of it. And I think I'm going to do another version of this, so that instead of starting at 8 millimeters, I'm going to start at 6.5 or 7, and then go down, and that'll take the overall weight out. If somebody wants a lighter version of an arming sword. However, we're already at 2.5 pounds. I don't want to go too much lighter. So those are our sparring blades at the moment. It's our current design, and we're excited to see if a lot of people like them. And again, come by Salt Lake City or in Phoenix cutting tournament in January, and I'll hopefully have a couple of these with me. And if you want to try them out and give us feedback, please do. If you want to get any of them, let me know. So that is our sparring blade. Am I forgetting anything? Nope, I think that's everything. And just as a quick recap again, and I'm worried that this is going to come out as Chris hates feathers type video, and that's not it at all. I have actually, I don't know if you can see, I have a couple of Reganés back there. I love the Krieger Armory ones. Usually when people ask for sparring blades, I point them over to Krieger Armory because they have great blades, and highly recommend all of those. And this is just for us saying, hey, this is our version. It's a bit different, and I personally think it more mimics an original blade, but we're doing so without having those blades hit hard. That's a hard thing to figure out, and that is why we have the blade geometries that we came up with. I have a couple other designs in mind that'll have Ricassoed versions and such. So look out for those in the future. And I think this video has probably run long enough. But so those are our sparring blades. I hope you like them and I hope you give them a try. And thanks a lot. And we will talk next time.